Welcome to Beyond the Valley, a CNBC tech podcast with Arjun Kharpal and Tom Chitty.
Beyond the Valley.
After 2024's crypto market surge, there is optimism among insiders that Donald Trump's presidency might bring more favorable policies for an industry that feels they have been the unfair target of attacks from regulators. My guest today is Richard Teng, CEO of Binance, cryptocurrency exchange that has had its fair share of controversy. In November 2023, former Binance chief Changpeng Zhao pleaded guilty to criminal charges and stepped down as the company's CEO as part of the $4.3 billion settlement with the Department of Justice in the US. Binance, under current CEO Richard Teng, has rebuilt and moved past the cultural issues, and the company is now looking for growth.
Beyond the Valley.
Richard, thanks for joining me for this special edition of Beyond the Valley from the World Economic Forum's meeting in Davos.
Thanks for having me.
So we will dig into your plans for Binance, but can we start with the markets? Bitcoin, record highs, the markets are very buoyant. Are you expecting this optimism to continue into 2025? And really, in your view, what's underpinning all this?
Oh, certainly. And I don't say it only now, right? So if you look at even some of the interviews I had in early 2024, I said then that 2024 is going to be a good year for crypto, but 2025 is going to be an even better year than 2024. And the basis for that assumption is, look, in early 2024, you see the approval of ETF, firstly in the United States, and then subsequently in many different jurisdictions around the world. And that represents a significant mindset shift, right? The institutions are coming, right? And for the longest time, if you think about the crypto industry, it has been embraced by grassroots, by the retail, and unlike any other asset class, that are firstly always adopted by institutions, then go down to corporates, high net worth individuals, then finally is available to retail. This is a grassroots movement, right? The retail embraced it, wanted it for the longest time, but regulators were not spending time on it. Financial institutions think it's a passing fad, they are not spending time and energy on it. And 2024 has been that instrumental shift in terms of mindset. And with the likes of BlackRock, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, if you go through the top 100 financial institutions in the world last year, everyone started to have a crypto agenda and blockchain strategy going forward. So that is a significant shift. Last year alone on our platform, we have seen a 100% increase in terms of the number of institutions that are being onboarded to start trading crypto. And that's actually very, very, very significant. And why do I say that 2025 is going to be a much better year than 2024? Because if you think about it, most of these financial institutions, they'll take their time in terms of due diligence. They'll take their time to do, strategy. How do you do deployment? And that would normally take 6-9 months, right? And macroeconomic environment has changed now. It's slightly much more benign in terms of inflationary situation. Macroeconomic situation is good. And last year, we got a big bonus towards the end of the year. You have the leader of the free world being elected that's pro-crypto. I think that gave it new optimism. And the narrative has shifted quite drastically. I'm in Davos this week. I've met with quite a number of country as well as corporate leaders, and the sentiment has shifted quite drastically since last year.
Yeah, we'll address the new US president in a moment, Richard. And I'll probably ask you this every time I see you, and you probably say, I don't do predictions, but do you think Bitcoin hits a new record high again this year?
Well, if you look at past cycles, again, this year will be a year that we will see a new all-time high for the crypto industry.
So let's tackle the question. We're recording this a day after a new president in the United States has been inaugurated, Donald Trump. He campaigned on the trail with the pro-crypto message, as you said, as well. And his whole thing was about creating a crypto-friendly environment. Now, I know your industry was very upset about the way the US Security and Exchange Commission, in particular, went after certain crypto companies as well. But under the Trump administration, what do you expect the environment to look like for the broader crypto industry?
Well, it's certainly going to be very different. So if you look at what happened in the last 4 years, at least in the States, right? So you have seen companies, especially in the crypto industry, gravitating out of the US because of operational choke point that happens. And they feel stifled in terms of innovation. And many of those innovation and then building was done outside of the States. I think under President Trump, it gave it new clarity. And it goes into different areas, right? So if you look at regulatory clarity, which is something that's very simple and that's very much needed for the industry, with, not only the president being pro-crypto, but if you look at the House of Representatives, the Senate now is pro-crypto compared to the past. So legislation will be passed. You have pro-crypto regulators being appointed to key commissioner roles in the SEC and CFTC and throughout the administration. So I think that's one aspect of it, which is extremely important for clarity in order for us to know how to operate in
So sorry, Richard, just to expand on that,
Yeah.
you think there will be more meaningful regulation in the US this year?
Much clearer regulations.
Okay,
Yeah.
and do you think a lot of people are talking about stable coins as perhaps the first wave first, because there was a bill already going through the legislative process. But are there other areas you feel that actually the US could take a lead here and create a real solid framework? Is it around trading or where else?
I think around all aspects. If you look at the current framework now, it's unclear on so many different aspects. So the more clarity that you can give on every aspect of it, from token issuance to trading to OTC to asset management, everything along that spectrum will be extremely important for the journey ahead for crypto. But that's just touching just on purely the regulatory aspect of it. But it's giving the certainty, giving the recognition that the sector needs. And, the formation or the possible formation of a US strategic Bitcoin reserves again speak volumes of the intention going forward. And it's not only the federal government. If you look at the state government, many of the state government are now looking to instill their own crypto reserve. And it will filter down. So the different multinationals, the Fortune 500 companies, will, I think, increasingly have their treasury do allocations to crypto.
Wow. Yeah. How does a Bitcoin reserve work? Has everyone heard? I'm asking for our listeners, I'm asking the audience, has everyone heard of the Bitcoin reserve that Trump has proposed? So how would that work in principle?
Well, it's similar to a country holding its assets in different asset class, and crypto is an important asset class going forward. I mean, the fact that President Trump appointed an AI and crypto czar in itself speaks volume about the importance of these two fundamental technology that's going to drive every subsector in terms of innovation going forward, right? Be it in terms of supply chain, financial services, real estate, entertainment. These two fundamental technologies are the key building blocks for the future. And it's extremely wise move on that front. But having said that, US will not be the first country to set up a strategic reserve in terms of crypto. Bhutan has already done that. And many countries around the world are considering this at this point in time.
Richard, can I just talk about perception for a little bit? Because your industry has been working very hard to change the perception of what crypto is, that it's not full of illegal scams and bad actors, right? That's something that a lot of people in the industry have been talking about. When you have the president and the first lady launching their own meme coins, does that help at all?
Well, I think we can have a debate and argument around that, but that just represents a different aspect of engaging the community and a different aspects of innovation, right? So innovation will go a different way, but crypto is so broad, and you're talking about a tiny sliver or within the crypto dimension, right? So if you look at what crypto represents, infrastructure layer, I mean the likes of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. Again, there are level 2 infrastructure, there's DeFi, there's GameFi, there's SocialFi, there's AI agents, and that list goes on, right? There's so many different aspects that people are building the future, transforming the space, the future of finance, the future of money, right? So if you just look at this particular sliver of meme coins or fan tokens, again, that represents a small part of it, but important aspect of getting the youth, the young, engaged on that front. Just very much like what you have in terms of meme stocks, right? Which is anti-establishment. People embrace that for different reasons. So we can't speculate. But if you look at the innovation and what it represents for the future, it means that there are a lot of experimentation that will happen in this space, and experimentation is important for innovation.
Yeah. I feel like everyone has to have their own coin these days. It's like the thing. Maybe I should launch one.
Not everybody has a pool.
Richard, with all the changes in the US now, how are you approaching the US market? Now, I know there is Binance US, a separate entity. Is there a world in which Binance Global re-enters the US market now?
Also, Binance is a global platform. We have today about 254 million users on our platform, making us the largest crypto ecosystem and largest blockchain player in the world. And last year alone, we onboarded, beginning of 2024, we have 170 million users. We ended the year with about 240. So we onboarded 70 million new users last year. So if you think about it, there are 30% new users on the platform that just was onboarded last year. And that figures keep growing this year, right? So we have hit 250 million earlier on this year. And we see that number continue to grow. So our focus is being a global platform to serve the needs of all global users. At this point in time, I think our key attention is on that. We are the most licensed platform internationally. We have 21 regulatory approval globally now, the latest being in places like Brazil, Argentina, India, Indonesia, Thailand, extremely big markets that we are working tirelessly to support crypto adoption and deployment. As for US market, I do think that we are holding a watching brief at this point in time, checking out what's the development going forward. It's going to be optimistic, but you do need some clarity on the way forward. And, we are always prepared. As and when the time is right, we are prepared to have a proper conversation around that.
Richard, you mentioned institutional investors being a key to underpinning the market and potential growth, especially going forward. What is happening with institutional investors this year, do you think? How are they participating in the industry? The ETFs, which came in last year, were a big deal around establishing crypto as an asset class and also bringing in perhaps more traditional investors in. So this year, what are some of the kind of key trends and things that you think are going to happen from the institutional side in crypto?
So I always explain to people that if you think about ETF, it's a great product, it's a low-cost product, but it is also a product for entry-level investors, right? So why do I say that? If you think about it, as with any listed product globally, you trade a certain number of hours a day, probably 8 to 10 hours, depending on the market you're talking about. So the majority of timing is not being traded. You can't take positions during those timing, during weekends, during public holidays, etc., etc. So the liquidity cost and price is extremely high for those products because, news is 24/7, crypto trades 24/7 on our platform and around the world. So any news flow, you can't take positions, you can't hedge your bets, you can't mitigate, and you can't offset your position. So for institutions, there's a huge cost to bear. I mean, the price of liquidity, right? It ranges from 40% upwards, where they have to be subject to a huge price. So once they have their first taste, and as they learn that journey and get much more savvy in terms of their investment strategy in crypto, we do find people over time gravitating to platforms like ours, which offer them 24/7 service, where they can invest, hedge, mitigate, offset their positions. We have the deepest liquidity pool globally. And, that's important because what it offers is you're offered a best beta spread. And, over time through trading, there's substantial cost savings in there, right? So if you look at, our liquidity is the deepest by any measure among the industry. So we do see a lot more institutions gravitating towards 24/7 platform like ours. And that's very important. And this includes all sorts, right? So from your pure institutions, from corporates having treasuries to do allocations, to traditional commodities houses or trading houses that trade commodities, FX, stocks, bonds, right? But now have added crypto into their array of products that they start trading. And they trade on behalf of their clients as well. So we are seeing a huge shift on that front. So the understanding is getting much better and the adoption rate is getting much faster.
In terms of regulation, we sort of spoke about the US, but there's obviously many jurisdictions around the world. And there was a point, perhaps still is, where there's fragmentation globally, where there are some countries and nations that are very forward-thinking and very open to crypto and others who haven't quite figured out policy yet on the topic. So in 25, given now the US has a very pro-crypto administration. Do you think that influences any kind of more harmonized or global rules and frameworks for your industry?
Well, there are two dimensions to that. So, firstly, the US has an outsized influence to, globally, in whatever sector, including in regulations, right? So, once the US become pro-crypto in that sense, you are seeing a lot of governments, countries, policymakers starting to take notice and say, hey, we need to start looking at crypto and what does it do for our economy in terms of FDI, similar to what AI does for their economy, right? So we're having a lot of those conversations, especially in Davos with some of the country leaders on that. So there's a new awareness of the ability of crypto to really transform their local economies. So that's one dimension. But you're touching on something that's beyond that on regulation. So what we do envisage is that you have more and more countries coming out with their regulatory framework to give clarity to this sector and to players to this sector to try to build and develop this industry within their own countries. Having said that, regulatory harmonization is a different thing altogether. In my view, that will take a long time because if you think about it, even today, for 1/3 of the countries that have started to regulate crypto, some regulate them as securities, some regulate them as commodities, something that is a digital payment token, and some have a just unique, calibrated, bespoke framework to just regulate crypto. And the spectrum is so wide in terms of rules and regulations. They are totally inconsistent with each other, right? The way you regulate commodities is different from securities, for instance. And in many countries, you have more than one national agency or one regulator looking after each sector. You have a banking regulator, you have a securities regulator, you have a commodities regulator, etc., etc. And first issue is who is going to be the primary regulator in that country. And I suspect US is going through that same debate at the same time, right? And that debate has to be determined at the local level, at the country level first, before you can escalate this and discuss cross-border at the international fora on how best to regulate this space and how do you harmonize the inconsistent rules that you see across the board now. So it'll take a long time before crypto achieve the same type of harmonization that you see in the banking and security space, right? So that will be some time away. But in the first instance, we are going to see a lot more regulatory clarity among countries. But that regulatory clarity will give rise to regulatory inconsistencies across borders.
Yeah. Richard, how long have you been in the CEO role now?
About slightly more than a year now.
So I still feel relatively fresh to some extent.
It is.
And I think a lot of people might not know this about you, but you were formerly a regulator.
Yes.
Yourself.
Yes.
So you have this hat in terms of the regulation side, and you're also now running this business which is going through changes in regulation, which is fascinating. Now I mentioned at the opening about sort of some of the bumps in the road in the Binance story with the DOJ and that you've focused a lot on moving past those issues and creating a solid business ready for growth. How are you going about rebuilding trust with regulators at this point? And also just what's your views on Binance's culture going forward?
Well, so maybe to put all those things into context, right? So Binance is a very young company. It's a 7-year-old going to 8 years old this year. So it's an extremely young company by any measure. Most 7-year-old company will still be doing their funding round, will still be trying to grow, still trying to get users, still trying to gain traction and credibility. I think we are blessed in the sense that, within the first 6 months of Binance being formed, it has become the largest crypto exchange globally on that front, thanks to the vision and foresight of CZ and the other co-founders, right? So, but if I bring you back to 2017, where Binance was founded, the landscape is totally different from what we are speaking on today, right? So 2017, no regulators were spending time on this sector. Again, institutions think there's passing fad. There are no rules out there in the marketplace, even if you wish to be regulated. So the landscape was totally different from what we are speaking now. So in those very early days, we make some mistakes. We have underinvested in things like compliance. But that has changed quite drastically, right? If you look at the landscape now, there's going to be much more clarity. I mentioned that 1/3 of global regulators are regulating this space. I took over the helm from CZ in November of 2023. I'm very grateful for that, to be running an extremely innovative and dynamic company and having the trust of the founders on that front. But the landscape has shifted, the dynamics has shifted. So as my first 3 commitment coming into this role as CEO, I said that first, Binance needs to be always a user-first, user-focused organization because that's the foundation of our success. Users make up what we are today, being the largest crypto player. So we need to continue to build the best-in-class platform, having the best features to serve our users wherever they may be. But secondly, very, very importantly, given the direction of travel is one towards much more compliance and regulation in nature, we have to work very closely with policymakers, regulators around the world, invest very heavily into compliance, and make compliance a competitive advantage for ourselves, right, which is extremely important. So other than being the best-in-class platform in terms of having the best products and features and user focus, we have to invest heavily into compliance. And thirdly, we are still very early in the game. Right? If you look at crypto adoption, today is probably around 7 to 8%. So it's very, very early, and we are looking forward to working with global partners on that front to really foster a very dynamic, vibrant environment to continue to support crypto agenda, crypto deployment around the world. And you see some of those partnerships that we have inked last year, and we'll continue to discuss. But we're still very early. So if you look at what happened in most other technology, including internet, once you cross the 7 to 8% threshold in terms of adoption, the next 10% will come very quickly. So the next 5 years, we'll see very fast crypto adoption compared to the last 5 years. So we're very excited with the journey ahead.
Do you still speak to CZ? Does he have any involvement at this point?
No, so again, Binance has changed from a founder-led, CEO-led company to a board-led company. So last year, we've instituted a board of directors of 7 members, including 3 independent members and an independent chairman on that front. So today, me and my senior team work very closely with the board directors, our board members, to chart the path ahead for the company, and we are very confident of that. CZ obviously is a major shareholder, and he retained very important shareholding rights within the company on that front. But we are driving a strategy where we look forward to building a very sustainable and dynamic company for the next 50 years.
So what's the focus then for 2025 from a business perspective? Obviously, the exchange is the core business right now. What is going to drive growth in your view for Binance in 25?
Well, it's very simple. So treat your users right. So if you look at it, we do a lot of things way beyond what regulators prescribe us to do. So from the very early days, we make sure that users' interests are always protected. In many key decisions, we always ask, how will users be safeguarded? Are we protecting users' interests? And is this in the best interest of users, right? So that is a guiding principle for everything we do, being very user-focused. So that will remain unchanged. We want to continue to introduce new product features on our platform. Last year, we introduced many things, and this year we'll continue to push them out. Last year, if you think about it, we have like Web3 wallet being introduced, Super Earn product, Mega Drop, Binance Alpha, Binance Square, and the list goes on. And we make enhancement to some of those product features, including our Web3 wallet throughout the year. And this year, we'll continue to do the same. As when we are ready to push forth new product features, we will do so. And many of these product features actually come from our users and community who are extremely passionate, give us very good feedback and inputs on what else they want to see on our platform. So we'll do those engagement. We'll work very closely with global regulators, formulating frameworks around the world, supporting deployment. I mentioned we have 21 regulatory approval now globally. We'll continue to really support that agenda. And also, again, partnerships are important as we continue to grow this space, right? So a few of those things that we are looking to do and do well. But most importantly, for the space to continue to grow, innovation is extremely important. So we are looking to support innovation wherever they may be, because it's only with very important use cases and utility that you see the innovation will continue to spike. Let me just touch on something, right, on that front. In Davos, people talk about financial inclusion all the time. I've been in the financial services industry for 30 years now. And since day one, I entered the industry, people have been talking about financial inclusion. And even today, if you look at it, 1.4 billion people around the world are unbanked, right? Why do crypto exist and why do crypto prosper? It's not just because the youth wants it, because it's addressed an important problem. There's a problem statement to be solved. People can't get access to payment system. People can't get access to banks. We introduced a product called Binance Pay on our platform about 2 years ago. And if you look at what Binance Pay has done, right, roughly 26 billion has gone through that. But if you look at cross-border payment and remittance costs, it's extremely high, especially for things of smaller denomination, less than $1,000. So if I take the average transaction on Binance Pay, which is slightly less than $500, and even assuming a very low remittance cost, which is not possible for that amount, normally for that amount you probably have to pay between 10 and 15%. But assuming we take around 6%, the users on our platform, by using that, first they get access to the payment system, they get access to banking system, which they are otherwise unable to get access to. But more substantially, they save about 1.75 billion, north of 1.75 billion in terms of cross-border payment costs, right? Compared to what you have in the traditional sector. And it's instantaneous. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 days going through a few correspondent bank for the amount to reach your loved ones and family. And that is very significant. So we are here to support innovation and use cases on that front.
What about stablecoins then, Richard? Because a lot of people tell me, well, stablecoins, yes, they were traditionally used for trading in and out of crypto, but stablecoin issuers are now telling me, well, actually, remittances and various other financial transactions around the world are becoming popular. You had BUSD. It was shut down because of the regulatory unclarity. But stablecoin market has continued to grow. I think it's now in excess of $200 billion, the value of all the stablecoins. Will you get back into stablecoins as part of your offering?
Well, so we are supporting innovation, and stablecoin is an important innovation in this space, an important utility which is growing, right? So you can see adoption growing very sharply. So last year we have announced a partnership with Circle on USDC to support that. And that's not the only partnership we will enter into. We will enter into partnership as and when we think is useful and suitable for both parties to do so. But that's really as part of the agenda that I mentioned, is to really support innovation and utility in this space, right? And the more we can support that, the more crypto will advance, the more the industry will become extremely exciting and dynamic.
But a Binance branded stablecoin?
Well, at this point in time, we have no intention to do that. We have so many partners talking to us on different things. It's not only stablecoins, but on so many different aspects. We are so busy with this. But we want to be agnostic as much as possible to really support all these different platforms in terms of mutual growth.
Richard, I have 2 very quick questions, which you're probably going to laugh when I ask you. And
don't ask me the price of Bitcoin.
I'm not going to ask you the price of Bitcoin. But an IPO, is that on the cards at all?
Well, the truth is, Binance doesn't need funding, right? So we are very privileged to be in that position, and we can make all the important investments that we need to make, including in compliance, in security, technology, etc., etc. And those are extremely important areas, right? Security, for instance, we always tell regulators there's an area that regulators under-focus on. If you look at last year, so many platforms were hacked, right? In India, you have one of the largest platforms, WazirX. You have Japan, DMM, etc. And those were big hacks, 200-300 millions. Some of the companies were in liquidation. But that's an area that's underinvested. We came up with Safu Fund, again, to protect investors. And we stand at north of 1 billion now, again, in the event of undue security breach. But there are so many different areas that are underinvested. But the fact is, at this point in time, we have no plans. Mm-hmm. But I'm too old to say never, right? Never say never. But if we do, for whatever reason, take on strategic monies in future, we might want to think about that further down the road because, investors might need a route of exit going down. But at this point in time, we have no. And
just very quickly, Richard, anyone who follows Binance knows that the big question, are you going to announce your headquarters finally? Are you going to do that here on Beyond the Valley?
Well, there's something that we spend a lot of energy on.
Yeah.
Right? At this point in time, we have no news to announce. It's an enormous task. We have to be very deliberate about what we decide, including whether from a global taxation environment, double taxation treaties, whether we can house our talent there, the regulatory framework. So there are many different dimensions, but we are in deep talks with a few jurisdictions to land on a HIC.
Great, that's a nice point to end this conversation on. Richard, it's been fantastic. That's it for this episode. If you do want to contact us, email us at beyondthevalley@cnbc.com. Please follow and subscribe to the show, and you can leave us a review. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back next week for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Goodbye.
Beyond the Valley.